So there's three presenters tonight, myself, Lee Jackson, there's Stephanie and Kate as well. They'll be handing over the later part of the presentation. There's also, you probably were greeted obviously by Georgia and Sean and a couple of the other advisors here as well. If anybody has any questions they may want answered after the presentation, please feel free to grab one of us and just maybe have a quick chat, and we can answer any personal questions you may have that you may not want to ask in the public seminar. So the agenda for tonight is basically talking about retirement and superannuation. So first we'll touch on basically when it is you're probably likely to retire. Then move on to talking about how much you're going to need to retire. That's always a big question from a lot of people, is how much do I need? A lot of people think that there's a magic figure of $1 million. That's always a good start. But as you'll see from some of the figures in there, you don't always need exactly $1 million to have a comfortable retirement. We'll then talk about the issue of, do we look at putting more money into super, or maybe if you've still got a home loan or some debts, the issue there of what do I do if I've got some surplus funds. I'll then hand over to Steph. She'll be talking about building your retirement savings, talking about ways of putting money into super, the pros and cons of, or the ways of getting money into super, some of the issues about contribution caps, how can you put money in, and some of the issues there. And then we'll talk about in retirement about where your income's going to come from superannuation, from age pension. I know there's probably a few people here that may or may not know about age pension. But then, and the last issue we'll talk about is talking about the power of financial advice, talking to an advisor and how that can help you in the future. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the clicker. There we go. All right, so let's first move on to when you will retire. Is anybody here actually retired? Or is everybody still working? Any show of hands of people who've stopped work? One over there, okay. All by yourself, all in the corner there as well, okay. Oh, another one, sorry, beg your pardon. There we go, so we've got two. Basically, say if you're still working, I assume everybody's working and looking to build their retirement nest egg, their superannuation. Does anybody here have may not be a written formal retirement plan, but does anybody have an idea about what they think they're going to need to do heading into retirement? A few shaking of heads, you've got a good idea? Yep. And has anybody here seen an advisor before?
I know about it.
Okay, we'll try and fill in that 15% gap for you. Anybody have ever seen a financial advisor and sat down and put together a financial advice? That man in the back, thank you. I think I know you from somewhere. Yep. No, that's great. That's great news, because that's a good opportunity for us then to hopefully, fill in that 15% gap. Okay, first thing you want to look at is just talk about the actual retirement landscape and what that means. So you'll see on the screen there that basically what retirement used to be in 1950 as an example compared to where it is today. And you'll just see purely from those numbers that back in 1950 there was a lot of people that started work early and also worked a bit longer, but retirement was maybe not as long as what they'd hoped for. Whereas compared to today, you'll probably find that people are actually maybe starting the workforce a bit later in life, whether that's because of education or studies, but also as well on the other end of their working life, they may be retiring early, which is a great thing because that usually comes around from people who've saved, people who've maybe bought an investment property, people who've put more money into super, but they've worked hard and they've finally saved quite a bit of money. But you'll also notice as well though, that we're spending a lot more time of our life in retirement. There's up to maybe 20 odd years, a third of our life can be all about using our money to enjoy our retirement lifestyle. And so the question then becomes is, well, all the money you've saved while you're not working, you need to start making that money work hard for you because you need that income stream, you need your money to grow. So what are some of the concerns that we talk to our clients about when they're moving into retirement? Obviously, a lot of people have concerns about their health. Obviously, we know a lot of people, that family and friends that may have suffered some serious health issues, and that's always going to be the case as we grow older. We know that there's also a large chunk of people that actually fear that they're going to be a burden on their family, so on their close family, that they may need help from them, and financially they may be a burden. Over nearly half of people we talk to, they have concerns talking about running out of money. Are they going to have enough money when they move into retirement to last for their life expectancy? Some of the other concerns that people may have, and this is more to do with the mental health side of it, is the fact that some people start to feel lonely and not having a purpose. whilst we're working, generally most of us wake up and head into work and trudge the 9 to 5 job from Monday to Friday. But after you retire, you may not have that opportunity anymore to have that social interaction with those people that you used to work with. So whether they're good or bad, whether you like them, whether you don't, that social interaction all of a sudden becomes a missing part of your life. So that's an important part to consider and think about, because an advisor can help you on the financial side and address these financial issues, but it's important to make sure that mentally you are ready for that retirement phase as well. And lastly, there's obviously a small portion of people that with their children, with their grandchildren, that they want to have something left for them as part of their legacy, something that they can hand over to them in their estate as well. Do anybody want to put their hand up and say that they share some of their concerns as well? Anybody fear that they're not going to have enough money? That was a hand raised there. Yep. Any particular ones that you feel really concerned about? Yeah, absolutely. Yep. We get a lot of people that when they're in pre-retirement phase, a lot of clients that come to us and they think, great, when I finally can hand in my letter of resignation, that the next day is going to be about sleeping in and maybe enjoying golf and maybe doing a lot more around the garden and spending time with the grandkids. That may be what they think is going to happen, but sometimes that may not be the case. And there certainly is that issue that people say, what am I actually going to do? There's possibly only a certain amount of time that you and your wife can actually maybe live under the same roof from 24/7. All right, so now let's touch on basically how much are we going to need to retire. So let's talk about spending habits that we have and the phases of our life as we move through it, and specifically talking about obviously when you get to retirement, that you're going to have a really active phase when you first move into retirement where you're going to hopefully do more holidays. You're going to be spending more money, whether that's just on regular holidays. You could be talking about just updating cars, doing some work around the house, maybe even helping out, gifting some money to kids, grandkids, maybe helping them out as well. But you're going to have that active phase where early on in retirement, you might find that you're spending a fairly considerable amount of money. And the question then becomes, if I can continue to spending this much money, how long is it going to last? After a while, you might find because of health that you may be starting to scale back on the holidays maybe, or not doing quite as much active spending of your money. So as you move closer to, say, roughly around 85, you might find that you're starting to scale back, and it becomes a point in time then when you reach a certain age when you need to start considering spending money on health issues, on medical costs, and also as well talking about moving in maybe into aged care. So that's a big part of our business now, that we're finding a lot of our clients, as they get older, they need to start thinking about what's the cost of moving into an aged care facility as well. Some of you may have had the issue of having to help your parents, mums or dads moving to an aged care. Has anybody gone through that recently at all? A couple of hands, yep. And that can be quite stressful, not just on your mum and dad, but also on yourself helping out as well. Yep. There's a whole area of aged care that's a bit of a black box of unknown about what's involved in doing that. That's something that we can also help our clients with as well. All right, let's talk about some actual figures about how much you need in retirement as well. So up on the board there, I've got what's called a comfortable lifestyle. I've also got what's called a modest lifestyle. Now, I won't go into all the details right now. On the next slide I will, about what that actually means, but I just want you to look at the numbers in the middle of each one of those, that as a couple, if you want a comfortable lifestyle, the income needs or income expenses is roughly around about $72,000 a year. Yes, yeah, these are today's figures, yeah. Yeah, that'll be indexed. Now those figures this is a survey that's done every quarter by the Association of Super Funds Australia. And it's the survey that they do of their members, of the clients, and basically work out what are they spending their money on. Now, you probably all noticed over the last couple of years with inflation, just even buying groceries from Coles and Woolies has gone up, insurance costs have gone up. So absolutely, those figures CPI will inflate every year as well. But as you can see, $72,000 for a couple, just to have a nice, comfortable lifestyle. Or as a single person, you need around about 50-odd thousand.
So these are gross figures, aren't they? Or they net because there's no tax?
These are net figures in the sense this is what people need to live off. Now, depending on your situation, your gross income may be a little bit more if you're paying tax on certain income streams. Income streams, let's say you had an investment property.
It's different, yes.
Yeah, things like that as well. Superannuation, Steph's going to touch on the benefits of superannuation and allocated pensions and the tax advantages there. But yeah, these figures are what people need after tax. Generally, a lot of people in retirement don't pay tax. Yep. And just the middle column of that, modest lifestyle. So you see the difference there that a couple to have a modest lifestyle only need 47,000 compared to 70. Single only needs 32, 33 compared to 51,000. So those figures, so keep those figures in your mind there. And then I also just want to touch on this other column in each one that talks about the super balance. So this is what generally is needed by a couple or a single person that they can use as their nest egg to produce that $72,000 a year, as well as possibly receive age pension as well. So you may have some age pension thoughts in your mind as you get closer to age pension age. We find with our clients that you don't need necessarily, as I said before, $1 million to retire on. You can get away with having maybe $500,000-$600,000 and also receive age pension. And again, Steph and Kate will go through the details about what age pension means and how that assessment goes in a bit later on. But basically those figures there are what you need in your super on top of receiving age pension to produce those income. And for a modest lifestyle, you can see that those super balances, a fairly small balance is 100,000. It's certainly not 1 million, it's certainly not 500,000 or 600,000. But basically just to exist with a modest lifestyle, you've got most of your income coming from age pension and you've got a little bit of income coming from your superannuation as well. Any other questions on that slide? Any figures? Does that make sense for most people? If you're not ahead, got a question? Sorry? Average weekly earnings. Yeah, just a nice way of saying indexation.
So just to clarify, the 690 balance, I understand that, but you're saying that to get to 72,000, you have to be drawing down on your super fund.
Spot on, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Hopefully everybody heard that question or that what the gentleman just mentioned.
So I just said that...
Sorry, what he's mentioned there is that yes, to produce that 72,000, you're receiving some amount of money from age pension and you've also got a super balance. So this assumes as well that your balance of your super is going to eventually run out as well over your life expectancy. All right, so let's also touch on what that actual comfortable lifestyle means and what the modest lifestyle. In your pack as well, one of the handouts that we use, that purple little sheet, that's just a printout from that ASFA quarterly study that they do, and that just goes to just point out some of the things about what a comfortable lifestyle is. So if you see on there, you've got things on there that a comfortable lifestyle is making sure that you can pay all those daily essentials, making sure that you can turn the lights on, feed you and the family, making sure that you can put petrol in the car, clothe everybody. And then talking about, well, a comfortable lifestyle means you've got the money to be able to stay healthy, pay for private health insurance, making sure you can pay for doctors, maybe having a health membership. But also as well, there's this social stuff and connecting with family, so that you've got things like where you can afford to make sure that you can go to the movies, you can have your streaming services, you can have your Netflix, your Stan and every other streaming service. You don't have to really worry too much and scrimp and save. You've also got the travel as well. So with a comfortable lifestyle, you want to look at, say, what type of holidays do we want to do in retirement? Well, a comfortable lifestyle maybe that you want to do maybe some overseas travel. Whereas if you look in the middle there, a modest retirement, a modest lifestyle is one that maybe you're not doing overseas travel. It may be just within Australia and just doing some holidays every now and again, maybe flying interstate, maybe driving interstate. So I know I certainly want to have a comfortable lifestyle. I think everybody does. Everybody wants to be able to travel, help on a plane, head towards the sun. The left-hand column there, where we talk about what's age pension. I won't go into too much detail about the exact figures because, again, I'll be stealing the thunder of the presentation a bit later on from Kate. But an age pension payment for a couple basically totals around about $42,000 a year. If you remember before that last figure there, that even to have a modest lifestyle, a couple needs around about 47. The age pension to a couple will provide around about $42,000 a year in total. Again, these figures Kate will go through a bit later on as well. So it's important when you get closer to retirement to think about, well, what type of retirement lifestyle do I want? It's nice to just say, okay, yeah, well, I want to travel a lot, I want to do everything, but we've obviously got to be realistic and we've got to work within everybody's means. Okay, so how long does our super need to last us for? Just to put that in context, just to show you the figures there, that somebody who's 65 today is going to live for another 20 more years. So as a male, just a smidge under 20, and females are around about 22 and a half as well. Again, compared to where it used to be, that we're obviously living longer because of medical and technological advances and so forth, and we're hopefully being a little bit healthier as well. So we're going to be spending hopefully a lot of our life in retirement and making sure that we can meet those needs. What are other things to consider? Obviously, you want to talk about planning for you and your partner's retirement, but you may also need to start considering how you're going to support other family members as well. So there's a nod there about obviously looking at some of these things that we'd love to be able to obviously help our family members, whether it's our own direct children or even our grandchildren as well. And we're finding more and more clients want to do that. And then the question becomes, how do we do that? How do we facilitate that? What's the impacts on your capital as well? And you may also find that there's other extended family members that you might need to help, or you might want to choose to help as well. Just moving on to one area now in terms of repaying debt and building your super. So as advisors, we often get asked that when people come to us to see us and they're in the pre-retirement planning phase, that maybe the kids have left home, they may finding that their home loan's reducing, getting smaller, and they find that, okay, we've started to get a little bit of surplus cash flow here, and what do we do with that? A client may sit down and say, Lee, I'm finding that I can maybe afford to put $100 a week, $1,000 a fortnight, whatever it may be. I can start to use some of this money that was originally going to pay for some kids, that I can start to use. What do I do with that? Do I pay it off my mortgage? Do I really work at paying down that home loan? I don't think anybody wants to move in retirement with having a home loan still hanging above their head. But there's also a thought that basically, what about if I don't put more money into my home loan, maybe I can start to put more money into super. You can look at it from purely a financial position and say, for every dollar that I have in my pocket, do I pay it off my home loan? A home loan that's currently being charged at 6.5% maybe? Or do I put that in super and hopefully earn 6.5%? The average balance fund in superannuation over the long term will earn maybe 7 or 8%. So you can see purely just from the maths, the bottom line, when you compare it, you say maybe it is worthwhile me putting more money into super, get a better return on that dollar. I still need to pay my home loan off. So maybe in the future it's, well, we build your super up now. When you get to a stage in your life where you can actually access your super, the preservation age, you can then look and say, I'll take the money out of my super and pay off the loan. And am I likely to have more money left over in that scenario? Now, obviously, some of the issues there, and this is what I'll hand over to Stefan to talk about, is how do you get more money into super whilst you're still working? The contribution caps, the timing, making sure that your cash flow doesn't affect your cash flow, and she's going to talk about the tax benefits of both as well. Any questions on that before I hand over? Would anybody like to raise their hand and say that maybe still got a little bit of a loan left over? A home loan? Yep. Nothing to be ashamed of. We also have Sean out here, he's a mortgage broker, he'd be happy to come and talk to you as well. Okay, so I'll hand over to Steph now, and she's going to talk about your retirement savings.
Thank you very much, Lee, for that. Hopefully my voice is loud enough. Can I get a wave in the back row? Yep, excellent, good to see. Thank you all again for joining us this evening. In my next section, I'll be talking to you about building your wealth and growing your super in the lead up to and also during your retirement. One of the common questions we get from clients is whether it's better to invest your money inside or outside of super. Now, there are various factors that need to be taken into consideration when making this decision. However, this next table will hopefully give you a bit of an idea as to some of the differences and similarities of both options. So when it comes to investment selection, whether you invest inside or outside of super, you're generally going to have quite a large investment range. So it could be cash, term deposits, direct shares, managed funds, and so forth. However, it's good to keep in mind that with some super funds, industry super funds in particular, they do have a limited investment menu, which means that you may be limited in your investment choice. So it's always good to do a bit of research on the different super products as well as their underlying investments, and perhaps seeking advice on which investment option and product may best suit you. In terms of the ownership, if you were to sell an investment inside super and you were to receive a capital gain on that investment, unfortunately you can't really share that tax implication with anyone else. You incur the gain, that then gets added to your assessable income, that then gets taxed in your name only. So you don't actually get the benefit of splitting that tax implication with anyone else. However, if you invest that money outside of super, you could potentially invest in joint names with somebody else. So if you do sell an investment outside of super and there's a gain, you can then potentially split that gain and any tax implications that come along with that. In terms of access to these funds, having money inside super means that you need to meet a condition of release before you can get your hands on that money. Now, Kate will go into conditions of release a little bit later in the presentation, but just keep that in mind. When it comes to investing your money outside of super, you generally have access to it as you need it. So that can be one of the benefits of having it outside of super. But what some people often do is they do a bit of both. So they might say, in the next 12 months, I'm going to need X amount of money to replace or upgrade my car. So I might keep a little bit of money outside of super to cover those costs, and whatever money I have left over, I might contribute that to super and enable that to grow and take the benefits of compounding returns for your retirement. Now, one of the most significant benefits of investing your money inside super is the tax savings. If you're a high tax income earner and you're receiving investment growth outside of super, you could potentially be paying up to 47% tax, including the Medicare levy. However, if you have your money invested inside super, or even what we call a transition to retirement pension, which Kate will go into more detail later in the presentation, any growth on investments are taxed at 15%. Then once you meet a condition of release and retire, or meet that magic age of 65, any growth on your investments inside super is essentially tax-free. Once you get to your allocated pension and you're retired, you can draw an income from it, and that is also, once again, tax-free. Any questions before I move on to the next slide?
Right, so you said that there's a maintenance inside super and there's accumulating and making money, and you tax that 15%, but if you're over 65, zero.
What happens is you've got three different types of accounts. Think of it this way. So it's the same money, but it's moving from one account to the other. So while you're working and you're building up your employer's making contributions, you're trying to build up your nest egg, it's sitting in that super account. Any growth on investments in that account is taxed at 15%. There's an in-between account called a transition to retirement pension, which is, it might be you're still wanting to work, but you want to access a little bit of your super funds. You can transfer the money into that type of account, and the tax implications are the same. So any growth on investments are also taxed at 15%. It's not until you reach your preservation age, which we'll have a table on one of Kate's presentation slides down the track. Once you reach your preservation age and you retire, or you reach the age of 65, you can actually start a retirement allocated pension with those funds. And that's when it becomes tax-free. Good question. Yep, so once it's in the allocated pension, that retirement phase, there's no capital gains tax. And Kate will cover off on that as well towards the end of the presentation.
So just to
Good questions.
clarify, so
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're 65 or over in super, it's still...
Correct, yes. So just to clarify, if you do not move your super funds from that super accumulation account to that retirement allocated pension once you reach age 65, generally the super fund will automatically change it across for you if you've got that transition to retirement pension. But if it's still sitting in super, it still gets taxed at that 15%. Yeah. Is there anyone that is over the age of 65 and still has their money in a super accumulation account? No? Okay.
Still, you can do that.
Yep, you could keep it in super for the rest of your life if you wanted to. So there are some people who say, hey, I'm happy to suffer the 15% tax on my investment earnings because I don't want to start an allocated pension. I don't want to, once again, I don't want to steal Kate's thunder because she's going to go into some details around how they specifically work. When it's just in a nutshell, when it comes to super accumulation accounts, you're adding money to the account. Once you commence, whether it be a transition to retirement pension or an allocated pension, you're required to take a minimum payment from that account. So one's while you're building it in super and the other's when you want to start drawing an income stream. I'll stop there because I know Kate's going to be talking about that shortly.
Maybe that's a question for Kate, but you did say 65 again, but surely if you're 65...
Absolutely. Yep, spot on.
So why did you ask the question, who's 65 and over and still covered?
So you can have both. So what some people do is once they get to 65, they might say, hey, I'm going to keep a small balance of, say, $5,000 in super to accept my employer contributions or any other after-tax contributions you might want to make, and then the remaining balance gets transferred to this allocated pension where you're allowing, the majority of your funds to grow at a tax-free rate. Yeah, and look, there's going to be that trade-off each. Yeah, and you can always, but once you draw down on those funds, you can always contribute them back to super, but which once again, Kate will cover off in that. Yeah, just a question because some people leave all of their super funds in super at the age of 65, not realising that they can actually benefit from transferring the majority of their funds into that allocated pension. Yeah, that's okay. So whether it's a self-managed super fund or a normal retail type fund or an industry super fund, super rules are still the same. So it'll be your accountant that does the record keeping and saying, okay, so at one stage it's going to be in super, and then if you want to transfer it to a pension, you have to actually notify your accountant to settle that up for you and make sure you're drawing your minimum payments.
Not asking that.
Yes, you can
Are
wind
you talking
up
about
your
winding
business
it?
later and put it into a retail super fund.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the age of 61 or 62.
Yeah, at any stage you can wind up your USMSF and put it to a retail super fund. Once the
So
we
you-
don't want to do it now because if we do it now, we will pay CDD.
Yeah, so just
We can make it.
not sure if you
So
can
we
all-
don't want to contribute.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if many of you could hear that, but we're just talking about self-managed super funds and whether or not you can wind it up at any stage to move it across to a retail super fund at that point. So the answer is yes, you can wind up your self-managed super fund at any time and move it across to a regular retail industry super fund when you please. And you can go both ways, to a self-managed super fund or to a retail fund. Yep, perfect. Any other questions? No? All right, we might proceed on to the next slide. Okay, so this next slide talks about the different types of contributions. The icons represented by the pink pictures are your before tax contributions, so also known as concessional contributions. Now these include SG contributions, which are your employer compulsory contributions, which is currently 11% for this financial year. We have salary sacrifice, personal deductible contributions, and also carried forward concessional contributions. For all of these before tax contributions, the cap for this financial year is $27,500. Now I'll go into more detail on each of these contributions in the next few slides, but this is just a summary of those particular contributions. Below these contributions, you can see the icons in purple, which are the after-tax contributions. And these include personal, spouse, government co-contributions, and downsizer contributions. The cap for this financial year for your after-tax or non-concessional contributions is $110,000, or no more than $330,000 for 3 consecutive years under the bring forward provision. One thing also to note on this slide is that although the downsizer contribution, so this one over here, counts as an after-tax contribution, it technically does not actually count towards this $110,000 cap. Any questions? All right. Okay, so let's take a deeper dive into the before-tax concessional contributions. Starting with salary sacrifice. Can I get a raise of hands of anyone who is currently salary sacrificing or has potentially thought about it? Okay, yeah, a couple of people, great. Was that initiated by yourselves or did someone inform you about how to do that? Yep, great. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of what it would be like to not salary sacrifice and purely receive your employer contributions into super only, versus if you were to salary sacrifice $50 a week in addition to those compulsory employer contributions of currently 11%. In this first table, we can see that this person has a salary of $80,000 per year. This scenario, just as a reminder, is if you were not to salary sacrifice. That $80,000 is your gross salary, less the $18,000, which is the marginal tax rate, plus the Medicare levy on this $80,000 per annum, which gives you a take-home pay of just under $62,000. There's also your employer contribution, which works out to be 11% of your $80,000 less the 15% tax when it goes into the super fund. Now, just as a reminder, when it comes to salary sacrificing, for those who are not familiar with this strategy, what that really is an arrangement between you and your employer, where your employer actually sets aside a portion of your income and puts it into your super fund, which then gets taxed at 15%, rather than you actually taking it home and paying your marginal tax rate on those funds. So you're getting that benefit, that slight tax saving benefit, although some money is actually going into super as opposed to you being able to take it home. In this scenario, we're salary sacrificing $50 per week, so $2,600 per annum. After your $80,000 salary has come through, you've contributed or salary sacrificed $2,600. You've then paid tax on this reduced amount of $77,400 rather than the full $80,000, which means you've got a reduced tax amount of $17,170. That then gives you a take-home pay of $60,230. If you have a look at the super contribution, that has also gone up because you're not only receiving your employer contribution, but also the salary sacrificed amount less the 15% tax. So in summary, as a result of salary sacrificing $50 a week, your take-home pay is reduced by about $1,700 per annum. However, your income tax payable is reduced by $897 per annum, and your superannuation savings increases by around $2,210 per annum after the 15% tax has been taken out. So what does this all really actually mean? On this next slide, it gives you a bit of an idea of how this might play out. So if you were 40 years old today and you had no money inside super and decided that today's the day you're going to start working, you're going to start getting your employer contributions of 11% per annum, plus you're going to start salary sacrificing $50 a week. What this then means is between the age of 40 and 65, potentially when some of you may choose to retire, your balance, if invested in line with an average balance portfolio, could be around $130,000 greater than if you were not to salary sacrifice. So by salary sacrificing this amount and allowing the compounding returns of your investments in, say, for example, a balanced portfolio, enables you to benefit from that potential balance increase at retirement, so that you can obviously do what you want in retirement and enjoy using more of that money. Any questions? Okay, excellent. All right, so just in summary, salary sacrifice, means that you're getting taxed at 15% when the money's going into super. Any additional contributions may also incur an additional 15% tax. So be mindful of contribution caps. And also if you're earning over $250,000, that could also lead to an additional 15% tax due to SG rates and the total amount that gets contributed to super. However, the total of potentially 30% tax may still be less than your marginal tax rate if you were earning $250,000 anyway. So you're still getting a bit of a tax savings by putting it into super rather than taking it home and paying your marginal tax rate. So we've got a good grasp of what salary sacrifice is in terms of it being an arrangement that your employer sets up and does regularly for you. Personal deductible contributions, on the other hand, although it has the same end result, this money, rather than your employer putting that money into super for you, you're using your after-tax money in your bank account because you said towards the end of the financial year you've got a bit of spare money that you no longer need. You might put that into super, let the super fund know that you want to claim a tax deduction on it. So what they then do is they tax it at 15%. They give you an acknowledgement form which you then pass to your accountant when you're doing your tax returns, and they reduce your taxable income by the amount you put into super. Ultimately, salary sacrifice and personal deductible contributions have the same result at the end of the day. It just comes down to whether you can be disciplined enough to actually contribute that money to super when you've got that excess money, or whether you would prefer that your employer sets up the arrangement so you don't even see the money, it just goes straight into super as your pay comes through. A couple of things to note. These contributions may not be beneficial if your marginal tax rate is less than 15%. Also, the annual cap of $27,500 includes your employer contributions. So be mindful, you've got the $27,500, but before making any of these before tax contributions, make sure you take into account how much your employer has put in for you. The $27,000, so your employer, sorry, is that better? So the aim is to keep it under that $27,500 to avoid having to pay additional tax. Depending on how much you earn, the 11% might amount to it being less than $27,500. So you might say, I've got another extra $1,000 that I can salary sacrifice, and you just wouldn't put any more than that $1,000 into super to make sure you keep it under that $27,500.
What's the tax rate if you go over the 27.5?
So it could be an additional 15% tax if you do. Like for example, if you're earning over $250,000 a year, you naturally could be receiving employer contributions, that 11%, which pushes you close to that, or if you're earning over $250,000, potentially over that as well. So that's where that additional 15% tax may apply. So there's a couple of different things, even when you go over your non-concessional cap, which we'll talk about shortly. Sometimes there's the option to withdraw the excess contribution, and any amounts that remain in the fund have certain taxes applied to that, as well as any growth on the investments during that time. Sorry, could you please repeat that? The 15% tax? Okay, so there's been no news as to whether they'll be increasing that. That's been the rate for many years. We haven't been informed of any increases in that tax rate at this point in time. We also have catch-up concessional contributions. If your balance was less than $500,000 on 30 June of the previous financial year, you may be eligible to use this particular strategy. So as we can see here in this table, so if we have a look back in the 2018-19 financial year, the concessional contribution cap was $25,000. This person has only contributed $10,000 towards this cap, which leaves them with $15,000 as the unused cap. We can then utilise the unused cap for each of these financial years and potentially use a contribution of $107,500 in one financial year without breaching the cap and getting penalised extra tax. So this can be beneficial if you're planning on selling a large asset or an asset that's going to result in a large capital gain, because by doing this contribution, it can offset some of those gains in that particular year. So rather than topping up your concessional contributions each financial year, you might say, I'm going to be selling this asset in 3 years' time, so I'm going to save as much of my cap as I possibly can and utilise it in that one financial year to then offset some of those gains and reduce your overall tax. Now, this can only be used for the last financial years. So it started on the 1st of July 2018, and then, like I said, it looks back for the last financial year. So you can't, unfortunately, take advantage of any unused caps prior to the last 5 financial years. Yeah. Correct, it can help reduce your tax, yeah, in that position, absolutely. Good question. So it depends on the actual contribution type. So in terms of tax on inheritance money, would this be able to assist with reducing tax by doing a concessional contribution? So it's really what happens when you're actually doing your tax return. So your accountant will confirm exactly what forms part of your taxable income, and if it does form part of your taxable income, you can utilise this strategy to do that. Sorry, I was just going to say, so the question was, if you've got an inheritance, coming through, can you use... If we've got an inheritance coming through,
Yep.
Can you utilise a concessional contribution or a catch-up contribution to offset any tax payable on that inheritance?
Looking at the account of the record.
Yeah, we're just looking at the account.
Liable for any inheritance, any tax
Over
on
there.
the inheritance.
There you go. So we've got an accountant in the house, which is their forte when it comes to the tax. So if you ever have any questions specifically around what's going to be taxed and what isn't, always best to check with an accountant. So we can obviously help with these strategies as financial advisors in terms of reducing your taxable position once you know what it is. But once again, if you ever need to clarify that, it's always best to speak to a tax professional.
And if you need
Yep.
the pack, feel free
Yep.
to
Highly recommend.
get in contact with them.
Nicole at Complete Commerce, great. Okay, any other final questions for this slide before I move on? Oh, Nicole, do you want to give us a wave up the back? Yeah, great. Cool. All right, so next set of slides is based on the after-tax contributions. Personal contributions are what you might make after you've already utilised your before-tax contributions, particularly if your taxable income is over 15%. So you've utilised that cap and you now have some extra money in your bank account that you wish to top up your super funds with. So you, as I mentioned on the previous slide, you've got up to $110,000 for this financial year, or up to $330,000 using the bring forward provision over the next 3 consecutive years. Once you get to age 75, you are a lot limited in terms of making these types of contributions. So keep that in mind. The earlier you get money into super, the more you might be able to get in, and once again take the benefits of the compounding returns while you're still eligible to do. There's also what we call the government co-contribution. So if you're a middle income earner, you could potentially make up to $1,000 of after-tax contributions to super, and the government will match 50 cents for every dollar of that contribution. So essentially, if you're earning less than around $43,500 and you put in that full $1,000 into super, the government would put that $500 into your account for free. For every dollar over that $43,500 up to $58,000, that rate that the government puts in slightly reduces. Once you start earning over that $58,500, you're no longer eligible for that type of contribution. You don't have to apply for this contribution, you just have to purely make the contribution to your super, and the government will, after you complete your tax returns, the government will credit your account that $500 or however much it is. It's usually done so after that financial year, it's usually credited to your account around sort of November to January after that. Just mindful of time because we've got quite a big section for Kate to cover off as well. So downsizer contributions to super. This is a great way to get money into super, especially if you're over the age of 75. So once you get to 75, I mentioned you can't just make any after-tax contribution that you please. With the downsizer contribution, if you were to sell a home that you've owned for at least 10 plus years, you could potentially be eligible to put up to $300,000 each between you and your spouse into super. Once again, it doesn't count towards the non-concessional or after-tax contribution caps, which is great. And once again, it just allows you to get that little bit more money into super if need be. So as long as you're over the age of 55, you can actually utilise this contribution strategy. One thing to keep in mind is that there will be an increase in super contribution caps as of next financial year, which is next month from July, starting with the before tax concessional contributions. So as I mentioned earlier, $27,500 is the current cap. As of next financial year, it'll increase to $30,000. With your employer compulsory contributions, the current rate is 11%, and that too will increase to 11.5% from July next financial year. So another thing just to remember, if you do have salary sacrifice arrangements in place, so for the couple of you that popped your hand up before, make sure that this increase in the employer contribution rate doesn't force your contributions to go over that cap. It does help that the cap has gone up a little bit as well, but just make sure you keep an eye on those each year. Also with the after-tax contributions, we will see an increase from $110,000 per financial year to $120,000 per financial year from July, which also means that the $330,000 you can contribute under the bring forward provision will also increase to $360,000. All right, so whether you decide to invest your money inside or outside of super, remember to diversify your investments as much as possible and not put all your eggs in one basket. So this graph might look a little bit busy and complex on your screen, but you should have a copy of it in your pack so you can have a closer look at it when you get a chance. So what this is telling you is if you started with $10,000 30 years ago and you invested that in cash, or you just left it in cash, which is represented by this grey dotted line, your $10,000 today would be worth just under $35,000. If you invested that $10,000 into property, it would today be worth around $83,000. With Australian and US shares, that money would now be worth between $140,000 and $176,000. So when investing money, you want to make sure that you've got a bit of a mix, depending on your risk profile or your risk appetite. By having a bit of a mixed or a balanced approach, you can at least make sure that if the market does drop, you're protected by these what we call income defensive assets, such as cash, fixed interest, but you're also taking advantage of the growth in that long term by having your money invested in shares and things like that as well. Right, any questions on that slide? No? Okay. Yep. Now this can be quite a hard decision, or trying to select investments as it is, so we encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions or you want us to go through the process of determining your risk profile, and we'd be more than happy to help you through that process. All right, and just finally, here's a bit of an example of if someone were to start with $500,000 at the age of roughly 69, 70, and how long their funds would last for if you left it in cash versus if you invested it in a moderate portfolio or a balanced portfolio. So as we can see by the purple line, which is if you invested your money into cash, that money would likely run out before you even reach life expectancy. Whereas if you were to invest some of your balance into more growth assets, as we mentioned on the previous slide, so things like international or Australian shares, you may have the benefit of allowing your balance to last another 7 to 10 plus years, which then means you can also pass on some of those funds to your loved ones or your beneficiaries. Any questions on that before I hand you over to Kate? So with a balanced portfolio, we generally say 30% would go into those cash and fixed interest defensive assets, and 70% would go into those growth shares and international and Aussie share investments. Yeah. Great. All right. If I have no further questions, I will pass you on to Kate, who will talk about now where you will actually get your income from in retirement. Thank you.
Lee's talked to you about how much you may need to have within retirement.
Steph's told us how to fill up our super bucket so that we have that amount that Lee spoke about. And now we'll talk about how we actually utilise that income within retirement to meet our needs and to go overseas and do all the travel and stuff that Lee spoke about when we're talking about a comfortable retirement. So there's three main sources of income within retirement that most people utilise. So the first, we've spoken about it a bit, you're already familiar with it, is super-based income. So that's talking about our account-based pensions, the transition to retirement pensions we spoke about briefly, lifetime annuities and term pensions and annuities as well, which aren't used as much these days, but in some strategies are quite useful. The next is your investment income. So a couple of people have already spoken about the fact that they have investment properties and things. So obviously you'll be familiar with the fact that you get rent from that property and that can help meet living expenses. Obviously mindful of the fact you have to pay tax on it as well. So cash at bank, share dividends, managed funds, all that type of dividends is and income is what we're talking about when we're focusing on investment income. And the last one is obviously the government pension. So for the majority of people, that would be the age pension, with some getting the carer's pension or the disability pension as well. So they're the main three sources of income, and we're going to talk briefly about the super and the government pension payments sections as well. And this is why. And this is talking about the principal source of income for retirees age 60 plus. So you can see here, for 70% of people, their main source of income within retirement is coming from the age pension. So they might still have some in investment income, they might still be getting some from their super pension, but for 70% of people, the majority will come from that age pension payment. 16% will come from superannuation, and once again, that's their main source of income. They may be getting $1 or $2 of government pension, but their main source of income is coming from that super. So we call number 2 and number 3 more self-funded retirees because their income is more self-generated. They're most likely close to the cap of the age pension, but most of it's coming from here. And this one down here you might think is a little bit strange. 5% is no personal income. But when we're talking about no personal income, we're potentially talking about someone with a spouse. That person's got no income, but their spouse has got a big income coming in, and together their combined assets are too much to be receiving the age pension, hence why they're not in that government line. So 5% of people are just living off their other half or family or things like that. So that's what we mean by no personal income. So the government, obviously, pension, as we said, 70% of people, that's their main source. So we're going to talk about that. And Lee spoke about it briefly before. For a couple, and this is, so once again, we've got our modest living and our comfortable living, and these are the figures that Lee's presented earlier. So we'll focus on a comfortable living because most people, I think, would agree that is what they would like within retirement. So we'll focus on a comfortable living and comfortable amount. So over here you can see around 44,000 we can get from the age pension, and these are the maximum amounts too, and that's combined figure. So that's not each, that's combined. Obviously the single figure's just for one person though. So we'll talk about how we might be able to receive the age pension and get the maximum amount from that. So the first step, there's 3 main steps, but the first one is age-based. So you can see from here, most people these days have to wait until they're 67 to be able to receive the age pension. Now, when we're talking about that, if you're a member of a couple, you both don't need to be age 67. Just one of you needs to be 67 and you can still apply. Sometimes people come to us and say, oh no, I haven't applied, my partner's not 67 yet, and we're just waiting. So it just has to be that one person, but when you're providing details, it is based on couples' assets. So it's based on both of your income, both of your assets, except for if you happen to have a spouse that's younger than you, and when it comes to age pension, that's a really good thing, because any assets in your spouse's name that's under age pension age, their superannuation assets, are not counted. So let's say your age pension age, so you're 67, you've got a spouse that's 60. If they've got 500,000 in their superannuation fund, it won't be counted as an asset for Centrelink. It'll basically just be ignored. So there's strategies that we do as financial advisors to try and structure things in such a way that we can make sure that potentially you might be able to get a little bit of age pension for a few years until both of you are eligible for the age pension based on age. So there's things around that we're looking at all the time as financial advisors for our clients because Centrelink, as you can see on this one here, Centrelink is something that we deal with as well on behalf of our clients. The next one down here is the residence rule. So to be eligible for age pension, you need to be an Australian citizen for at least 10 years in total, and 5 years of that needs to be consecutive. So that's that one. And then for the next one, you need to meet the income and the assets test. And I'll go into those in a bit more depth now. So at the top, you can see income and assets test, which one applies. So basically what we're talking about from that is Centrelink will look at your assets test, they'll perform the assets test, and they'll perform the income test. Whichever one results in you getting the least from Centrelink is what they will pay you. So obviously if the assets test says you get nothing, but you do under the income test, you'll still get nothing. So they will both look at both of them all the time. But as you can see here, for a couple, and this is homeowner and non-homeowner, but if you're a couple homeowner, you can have up to $1 million in assets together, combined, before you won't get any. There's a fair bit that you can still have in assets, and when we're talking about assets, we're not including the principal home, as you can see down here. We are talking about motor vehicles, boats, caravans, bank accounts, things like that. But in terms of motor vehicles, boats, caravans, we're talking about fire sale value. So if you were to put it out on your nature strip and say it needs to be sold today, what value would you get for it? Not what you might get if you advertised it and cleaned it all up and made it amazing. It's the fire sale value. So it's for couples, it's usually a lot less than what you think. And then other assets, obviously listed here as well. Now, for those of you that have talked about aged care, looking into aged care for your parents and things already, you may be aware, but assets don't include for them the refundable accommodation deposit if they've paid one for an aged care facility. So those things are also good to be aware of. Any questions on that? Yeah?
Yes, are you eligible?
It's based on asset and income. So you can have any type of asset as long as you're still under the asset test threshold or the income test threshold, then you'll get something. Yeah. But yeah, the investment property will be counted as an asset, and also if you're getting rental income, it'll be counted from that side too.
It's also, I'd just add, it's the net value
Yeah.
of the investment property. So if you may still have a loan against the investment property, that can be deducted off the actual value of the...
Yeah, so did everyone hear that? So it's the net value. So if you've still got a loan against the investment property, it's that net value. So you can take the loan value off it, and that's what they look at, yeah.
Is there a time frame? So, for example, I'm over 60 but not 67 yet. If I sell an investment property or a couple of investment properties, pay my CGT, pay a top up the residual in my super, put more in my super, buy a higher value.
Will they look back at that and still count that asset level? So that's a really good question. If you've done it in that way, investment property to a residential home, then no, that's fine. But they do have gifting rules. That might be what you've heard of before. So there's gifting rules. So for a 5-year period, there's a maximum amount that you can utilise. So if you sold your investment property, let's say at age 3, and then you gave $300,000 to your children, just in case you wanted to. I know most people would be, but if you did that and then applied for Centrelink, they would look back at 3 years ago and say, you gave away $300,000, so we will count that. But no, if you're doing it in that situation, you're selling the investment properties yourself to buy yourself a nicer, more comfortable home to retire in, that's fine from their side of things. Yes, the super balance would be taken into account once you were age pension age, exactly. So once, as we talked about before, if you had a younger spouse, you'd potentially put it in theirs.
Do the asset tests go up with CPI?
They do change, which is a good thing. You hope they change faster, but no, they do go up and index quarterly. Not a massive jump, every bit counts. Here, so assets do usually include bank accounts, investments, loans. So to take it off, or if you're loaning, so if you've loaned $100,000 to your kids basically in the last 5 years, as we just spoke about, then that would count as an asset. So it's a bit confusing. It's not debt loan as in borrowed from a bank, it's more you've loaned it out to someone and it's over that gifting level. Yeah, so they'll count that. Yeah, it's a bit confusing, so that was a good question. Yeah, and I think you had a question, selling a house, putting the proceeds into super, will that affect the assets test when she gets to age 67. So yes, because they're looking at your assets. Once you're age 67, they'll count it as an asset. So it will be counted from the assets test, and it will also be deemed from the income test, which is what we're about to speak about. Yeah, unless it goes to a spouse that's under age pension age, or it goes into your principal home, then yeah, they need to be aware of it.
And the family home is also exempt from the asset test,
Yeah.
like Kate was mentioning before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you kept the money in your family home, that would still be exempt. But if you were to sell it and you had some excess surplus cash, that would then count as an asset.
That's the question was, yeah, sorry if someone didn't hear the question, it was about downsizing and putting it into super. Yeah, correct.
And then I start.
You can, yes. So that question was if we didn't qualify at age 67, but we might further down the track at some stage because we're going on these amazing holidays and doing things, can we apply later on down the track? And the answer is yes, you can apply at any stage. Whenever you apply, there'll always be that 5-year rule back around in terms of gifting. But you just plan it out. If you know that's something you're going to do and you're in a position, you could do it before 5 years. But at the end of the day, they count it as an asset, but you would have had the asset anyway. So it doesn't put you in a worse position, if you think about it that way. All right, in the interest of time, we might keep going if that's all right, and then we can answer some more questions. Okay, so income test, let's say we've done well, we've passed the asset test, so we're moving on to the income test. What are the limits here? So couple per fortnight for the full pension, less than 360 per fortnight. Or below, as long as you're below 3,725, let's say, then you'll still get some sort of pension from it. Now, when we're talking about the income, we're not just talking about earned income from employment, because you can still work and get the age pension as long as you're under the income test, but you can still work and get it. So we're not just talking about earned income. As you can see up here, it includes deemed income from investments too. So Centrelink, sometimes we get people and say, no, I just want to leave it in my bank account, because by leaving it in my bank account, it's not earning as big a return, so therefore I'm going to get more from the age pension. And that's not true. Centrelink will look at your bank account and your super account-based pension. They'll all look at it as the same when they're looking at it for deeming, so they don't care where you're getting it from. You might have a super balance of 500,000 and you're pulling out 40,000 per annum, which we wouldn't recommend, but you might be doing that. They're not going to look at the fact you're pulling out 40,000. They're going to be looking at it based on these deeming rates down here. So they'll say you're pulling out, they'll count that 500,000 as around 9,500. They're really good at the moment. They're historically low, these rates. Most of the time you're probably earning a lot more than 2.25%, so it's a good thing, but that's how they work out the income test side of things. So once again, as I said, they'll look at your income test and your assets test. Whatever results in you getting the lower is what Centrelink will go with. All right. So if you're not eligible, so there's 3 types of concession cards. If the first one, as you can see, is income and asset tested, this one here, and that's because it's linked to the age pension. But if you're not able to get the age pension because you max out on the assets test or the income test, you are still able to get some concession cards. So I'll spend the next little while quickly going into what they are, because they're still worthwhile. Now, the first one is the pensioner concession card. That is the best one to have, and that is the one that you're granted automatically with the age pension. It's valid for 2 years, but it's reissued automatically because if you keep getting the age pension, you keep getting this one. The reason why this one is better than the other 2, let's say, is it extends to your partner and your dependents as well, and it gives you access to bulk billing, whereas the other 2 don't. As everyone can see, that obviously is a little bit more helpful from that side of things. So that, as I said, you get that one automatically with the age pension, you don't have to apply for it.
As long as you've got any part of the age pension, you'll get that card.
Correct. So the question was, as long as you're getting $1 of age pension, will you get the card? And the answer is yes. The next best one to get would be the low income healthcare card. Now, this one is, as we saw before, income-based. I've included the income limits down here over here. So in an 8-week period, income as a couple combined needs to be less than that 10,000. This one you do have to reapply for every 12 months. It can be a little bit annoying, but you do it on MyGov. It doesn't take too long, but you will have to apply for it every 12 months again, just to confirm that there's no change in your income. This one, as you can see, you still get the cheaper medicine, you still get access to PBS, you still get concessions on healthcare, and you get the state concessions here as well for utility bills, vehicle rego and things like that. So if you have a low income healthcare card or you get that pensioner concession card, make sure you're letting your electricity and your car regos and everyone know that you've got that card to see if there's some sort of discount you can be getting. So once again, worthwhile card if you can't get the age pension. And if your income is too much to get that low income healthcare card, then there's the Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare Card. The limit here, as you can see, for couples is $153,000 per annum. So most people can get this card. You don't get those state concessions still, like you do on that low income healthcare card, but you still get access to the PBS scheme and you do get some kind of concessions on some healthcare. And the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, you might be thinking, I don't take that much at the moment, it's not going to make that much of a difference. But as you get older, based on our client base, we know that a lot of people have to keep taking a lot more. And my dad, for instance, has to take a monthly medication and it costs $60 without being on the PBS. And on that, it's $6 per month. When we're talking about it being a good thing, it's a big difference that it costs.
So you're owning a property and you've got your rates to pay. Do the shires and the
Go back to this
councils
one.
look at you're giving concession on your rates?
So for if you've got the low income healthcare card,
Yeah.
some states do, and some we have heard some clients getting concessions on their rates. And that's what I mean. Just always tell them you've got a card. Is how we find it, because the answers we get back from different people are different. So we just always recommended that you show them the card if you've got it. Yeah. And as I said, because that one's based on states, so they can choose it everywhere. Yep.
Is the rental income,
Right.
so I'm getting $500 a week rent from my tenant, that's gross, but
So it includes employment income, rental income, so more taxable income, deemed income from investments, so bank accounts and things like that, and then certain payments from superannuation. So it says certain payments from superannuation because some people get a government defined benefit fund and things like that don't count. So your rental income will be net most of the time.
after
Yeah.
I've done my tax return and it's
Yeah,
all the taxes.
and then we've got to be under, single or couple, or under these limits.
Age on that, is there?
Limit in terms
No,
of,
isn't it? 'Cause it's just low income, isn't it?
yeah. But like I said, that one doesn't extend to family and things as well. It's better than nothing though. Everyone's got this in your packs. It's a little bit easier to see than up on the screen, sorry. And you'll see one more card on here that we haven't mentioned, this Victorian Seniors card. So that's a Victorian card. If you're over the age of 60, you can apply from it. You might see a lot of crosses on here, so you're going, well, why do I want this thing? It's got crosses everywhere. But it's the one you might see people flash when they go down to the local bistro and they get their seniors menu, and you get cheaper travel and transport and things like that. So once again, still worthwhile. It's not hard to get. So once you're over age of 60, you can apply for that. But yeah, so just don't worry about the crosses. You still get something for it. All right, so we've obviously Lee spoke about that standard. We've just talked about the fact that the age pension gets you halfway there, but it doesn't get you the whole way there. So if you're a couple and you want that comfortable lifestyle, you've still got around $28,000 personally to fund as a couple. So how do we do that? And that comes into that super balance that Steph helped us generate back then and build, and we kind of get it from there. And remember as well, Lee spoke about it earlier, if you do have family members, you may need extra funds to support them as well. Some people do need to help their parents get into aged care, or they need to help kids come to the bank of mum and dad to try and get into a first home and to do things like that as well. So that figure obviously could change, and you need to be thinking ahead about that, who you might need to provide extra support to as well. First up with superannuation, you're going, okay, I need to access it, I want to access it, can I? So this comes down to the conditions of release that Steph alluded to earlier on. So first up is, have you reached your preservation age of retired? So your preservation age is down here. It's based on a sliding scale. You'll be able to work out from your date of birth what your preservation age over here is. Most people at 60 now. So You reach your preservation age, so let's say age 60, and you retire full time. In that case, you get full access to your superannuation assets. You can take all of it out if you want to, you can do whatever you want, it's fully yours. The second one is that you've reached your preservation age and you begin a transition to retirement pension, and I'll go into that next, but there are restrictions with that one. So the maximum you can access is 10% of the account balance. So there are still some restrictions around that, and as Steph spoke about, you still tax the same way as super. The next one that you can see there is you cease an employment arrangement on or after the age of 60. So what I mean by that is you're working for XYZ and you decide to change that employment. So you're 61, you decide to move over to ABC because they've got a more flexible working arrangement, you like them better. That's what they're talking about when they mean cease a rate employment arrangement. So you're still working, but you've changed over to another employer. If you're 65 years of age, even if you haven't retired, and obviously if you pass away as well, it'll be left to whoever you leave it to, which we've got a slide on as well, so I won't go into that here. So they're the conditions of release and that preservation age that we were alluding to earlier. So transition to retirement is a way of gaining access to your superannuation when you're still working. The two main strategies that it's utilised for are so that you can cut back on working hours, or so that you can salary sacrifice more without reducing that take-home amount that you've got. This one's saying from age 55, based on the preservation obviously, you open a pension account alongside that super. So super and pension are under the same umbrella, but superannuation is your accumulation, that's where you're putting the money in, and the pension is where you're drawing it down, you're drawing your income stream. So they can run side by side, as we had a question about earlier, while it still works for you, and some people need to based on balances as well. So you've got them both running side by side. If you're working and doing it, you're topping up based on Steph's contribution limit she spoke about, you're getting the maximum amount you can into super on that side, and you're pulling an income down on the other side. Now the advantage of that is obviously you're getting that tax deduction by putting, if your marginal tax rates, let's say 43%, you're paying 15% by putting the money into super, then obviously you've got that tax saving there, but you're still taking home that same net amount to meet living expenses. The other one, we've got a strategy for here. So let's say we often have clients come to us, and as Lee spoke about, some of them go, I don't quite know what I'll do when I retire. Like, I'm a little bit scared about having lots of free time, or my kids have had kids, they want me to babysit the grandkids, I need to decrease my hours, but I don't have enough income to do that, I don't think. So this one here can show you, so this person's decreased from 5 days a week to 3 days a week. So the gross salary has decreased obviously by 40%. You can see the tax obviously then decreases because the gross salary is less, but then they take out a transition to retirement pension and they take out $20,000 from that. That gives you that same after-tax income amount to meet your expenses. Now, this big note here talks about the fact that if you were to go ahead with a strategy like this, you'd need to make sure that you were starting with an adequate super balance to begin with, or that you were growing savings in another way as well, because you wouldn't want to run out of super before you retired. Otherwise you may end up needing to rely on that age pension more. So that's just the one kind of thing that you've got to be wary of with this, but you can counteract that, as I said, by having other investments or investing like Steph spoke about earlier in a more aggressive way that's got more assets in growth areas, so getting a little bit of extra growth for a bit more risk. All right, allocated pension. So you've met that condition of release, you've retired, you've met 65, whatever it may be, you've now got full access to your superannuation. There's no restrictions, it's just yours. It is a 0% tax environment, as Steph spoke about earlier, so it is the best place to have money that you can. So your balance will be invested as per your super was. You can choose your investments. We want to make sure you're well diversified. That's a main thing that we do for our clients. We look at the way that they're invested. We structure it in such a way that when they're drawing income to meet their pension payments, if the market might happen to be down, it's not going to be having to sell things at a loss. So we look at all that stuff for clients, and that's something you need to be wary of as well. You can receive a regular income basically on any basis you want. You can have a weekly, a fortnightly, a monthly, whatever suits your budgeting needs. We have some clients that have age pensions, so they do it on a fortnightly basis on the same day as the age pension comes in, and then they can know that they can set that aside. You can also withdraw a lump sum at any time. As I spoke about earlier, you've got 100% access. If you know that your normal living expenses are that 72 that they talked about before, you can set up so you've got that regular pension income coming for that, and then you've got a holiday, you want to take a cruise all of a sudden, you need $10,000, you can take that lump sum out. There's no issues with any of that. So Steph alluded to these before. Obviously, pension income over the age of 60 is tax-free. No tax payable on investment earnings or capital gains tax once it's in that allocated pension phase. But there are minimum amounts that you have to take out based on the government, which is why you mentioned earlier, why you might have a super still at retirement, even though you're retired, versus having a pension. We do have a lot of clients in that position where they do have money in super still, simply because they don't need that extra income that they would have to be pulling out of that tax-free pension environment. So if they don't need it and it makes in their income in their personal name, that 15% is less than what they would have in their personal name, then it makes sense to leave some in super. So just be wary that is, and obviously as you get older, they're making you take out more because superannuation is for your retirement, so they don't want you to leave a massive nest egg to your kids. They want you to be using it for your retirement and not just living off them, basically. Down here you'll see a little bit of an asterisk. So it just says there's a limit on the amount that you can transfer into an account-based pension. As we talked about, 0% tax environment. The government doesn't want everyone's funds in there. They need to generate some sort of tax still to keep the government going, so you can have a maximum of 1.9 million in an account-based pension. You can still have more than that in superannuation, but that is all you can have in that pension vehicle.
You can only have one account-based, but you can have many, but the maximum you can have is 1.9 in account-based pension or the super account.
So the question was, can you have more than one account-based pension? And do they look at all of them to get to that 1.9? So you can have multiple account-based pension accounts, and quite often we do have our clients' accounts structured that way. We have one that's tax-free and one that's taxable, because as Nicole said, there's not inheritance tax in Australia, but a taxable portion on your superannuation fund, when it's passed to your spouse, it's fine. When it's passed to a tax-dependent child, they are taxed 17% on it. Quite often we do have two account-based pension accounts, so they look at the total balance of all of your account-based pensions for an individual though, not so you can have 1.9 million and your wife can have 1.9 million. So you can structure it in such a way that you can take some out of yours and put it into hers, for instance, so you can still get a fair bit combined into the pension phase.
Do you have any calculations between?
In terms of investment returns?
In super, how much?
690,000.
690,000.
For a couple, yeah.
If you have 400.
So are we talking about the moderate versus the comfortable lifestyles?
Is there anything in between with 400,000? For moderate, you're showing 100,000 super balance.
So these are the Australian Super Fund Association's figures. That 690,000 and 100,000 are from them. If you have 400,000, you can still survive, obviously, and you can do a little bit from the moderate stuff and you can a little bit from the other. But we don't have the exact figures tonight for that. That is stuff that we look at with our clients all the time. We look at, okay, can you suit that up or?
Yeah, sorry, I think what you're asking there is you can still have a comfortable retirement even with 400,000. It's just the longevity of your capital may need to be looked at. So you may say, okay, initially in retirement, I really want to have some really nice holidays, but I've only got 400,000. That's still doable, but it just means that at some stage you're really going to have to start thinking about how long is this going to last for. So there's no definite, just because you don't have 690,000 that you're not going to have a comfortable lifestyle. These are just figures that just to give you a bit of indication that, look, somebody who's just managing to survive, pay the bills as a modest lifestyle, you don't really need a huge amount in super. But if you really want to start having that comfortable lifestyle, really you need to head into retirement with 600,000-700,000 to last that your life expectancy. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't not have that lifestyle initially, because after a certain period of time you can just say, look, okay, we really had a great time in the first 10, 15 years of our retirement. we really need to start cutting back, or even things like downsizing. That's another thing you say, okay, we need to top up our super. We've really eaten into our super over the last 10 years. We need to think about how we're going to get some more money. That's when the downsizing concept might be important as well.
I would like to see the, like, it would be 60,000 or 65,000
Yeah.
or 55,000, because in 100,000 it is shown like, you will get 47,000.
So, and that's because 44,000 of that's coming from the age pension, so only 3,000 of it is being funded personally. So that 100,000 allows you, if you invested it, then it should be making you more than that 3,000.
So obviously with 400,000 you will still get.
So you could still draw that 70.
70.
You could still draw that 72,000.
85.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you just have to play around with things. You can change how your funds are invested. You've got the downsizer. Some people get inheritance from family. There's a lot of different ways that you can survive. We definitely don't have everyone that we see doesn't have 700,000 in super. You can still make it work. You can still be comfortable.
Should we talk about it just after we've finished
yeah.
up? We
Yeah,
might just have
that's a good idea.
one-on-one.
Who gets your super when you pass away? Lovely thing to think about, obviously, but most people think that when you pass away, your super automatically goes to your will and is distributed in accordance with your will, and that is not the case. Superannuation does not automatically form part of your estate, and that's not a bad thing. If it goes to your estate, for some people there might be some different family members or something like that, it might be contested. Whereas your super, as you can see here, there's eligible recipients here, so you could leave it to your spouse, child, financial dependent, interdependent relationship, or legal representative, which is your will. So you can choose to leave it to your will. There's different tax outcomes depending on who you leave it to, but that is who you can leave it to basically. So if you left it straight to your spouse, let's say, and these are by different types of nomination. So you can see here there's 4. I'm just going to touch on the first 2. Obviously we wouldn't recommend no nomination, but if you get here a binding nomination on a non-binding, the difference between those is that it comes down to the trustee. If you've got a binding nomination, so you say, okay, I want to leave it all to my wife. If you've got a binding nomination, the trustee has to pay it straight out to them. So it happens pretty quickly. If it's a non-binding, so you've still got a nomination saying you want to leave it to your wife, but you've signed it as a non-binding, the trustee will look at that and go, okay, they want to pay it to their wife, but we'll look and we'll have a see if there's an ex-wife or some other kids or someone else we think that might be able to have it as well, and they have to look into that. So it may end up going to your wife, but it can take 6 months. It just takes that extra bit of time. That's why we say make sure you look at the different nomination types and things as well, but whatever you do, just make sure you have one on the account. And as I said, you can leave it to your will, in which case it would then be distributed in accordance with your will. So that brings us to the end of that section. Next bit just talks about obviously our services. We've touched on a few pieces obviously tonight. We've just done really broad general terms. That's all the stuff that we look at plus extra for our clients when they come in. You can see it here on the banner as well. We provide advice around everything here. We suggest that people come in, have a chat to us tonight by all means, but we offer a no-cost obligation-free first meeting. So during that meeting, it's just an hour of your time, an hour of our time. We get to learn a little bit more about you in specifics. We can chat to you a bit more about what in your certain situation can help or might be able to help. As I said, there's no cost for that. There's no obligation. You can just walk away after that knowing that your assets are where they need to be, you're doing okay, or that there might be something you could do. So we suggest that everyone take advantage of that service and just check, make sure everything's you're doing a great, good first step to be here tonight. That's really good to see that you're all starting to think about this stuff. So the next step would then be, if you wanted to proceed, we would then go into strategies. We then prepare a financial plan, statement of advice plan, and then this one here with the exclamation marks, we implement it all, we do it all. You don't have to spend time worrying about any of that. And then obviously we review it and refine it, because your situation today is going to be different in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. And the government can also play with it. So they've obviously got the budget tonight. Hopefully nothing changes too much, but possibly a lot of this might be different tomorrow. So that is one of the advantages of having a financial advisor as well. We're constantly watching what happens. If legislative changes will impact you, we can get in touch and let you know. We're obviously checking the market, looking at the investments and stuff that Steph spoke about and things as well. All right, you can probably see Sean's little face over here because we've got him big on the screen. So I'll get him to come up. He's our mortgage broker. I'll get him to come up and quickly talk to you about him and a special offer that he's got happening at the moment.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. Everyone would have met me at the front when they came in. So I'm Freedom's in-house mortgage broker, so anything lending related I take care of. So if anyone in the room, I wasn't here when the hands went up who has a mortgage, but if you've got a mortgage, an investment loan, if you've got kids that may be looking at buying their first homes or they've already got a home loan, they want to review that, that's where I come into play. Debt consolidation, car loans, personal loans that we release, SMSF sort of lending, if someone has that, they're looking at that sort of lending, I can do all that as well. But I just want to go through our referral program that we have going on at the moment. So basically, if you refer somebody to me as the referrer, upon successful completion of their loan, so the loan must settle, as the referrer, you're entitled to a $200 gift card. And then for the person that you have referred through to me, we've split that up. So anything that they borrow with under $750,000 is a $300 gift card. Anything over $750,000 is a $500 gift card. And that applies to anybody in the room tonight as well. So if anyone is interested in reviewing their current situation and that moves through to a successful loan settlement, you are entitled to either the $300 or $500 depending on the loan amount. Just a bit about myself. I've been a mortgage broker for nearly 23 years. My service to you is free of charge. So mortgage brokers are paid by the lender, so we don't charge an upfront fee. More than happy to have a chat to you in the room, or you've got my contact details in the folder. So if anyone has any questions, happy to sit down with you and go through your situations, see where I can help. You can see there is a QR code on there, so if you are looking to send a referral through, you just need to click the QR code. The details are on there, and then I'll be emailed with the details of who you're referring. Did anyone have any questions in relation to any of that? No? Perfect. I'll hand you back to Kate. Thanks very much.
So Sean will be sticking around as well, so if you do want to have a chat to him about your rate, just to say, hey, spitball him and say, hey, do you think this is a good one? He'll be able to give you a pretty quick answer as well. So thank you all for joining us. As a reminder, you've got those feedback forms in your set. Feel free, please, hopefully fill them out. There's a section down the bottom if you would like us to touch base for that free initial consultation as we spoke about. You can just tick the areas that you're interested in and we can give you a call. But it's also valuable for us to have some feedback because we do run these presentations regularly. It's great to have feedback so that we know how we might be able to improve or where we've done well. There is a feedback form, Georgia over here in the green is holding it up. She'll have it by the front door, so drop it with her when you're done. And as I said, we'll all be sticking around to have a chat if you need to afterwards, or you can contact us and we can have a meeting. Thank you all for coming.